So, hello everyone. Hello Manish, hi, and hello Ricardo. I will just wait a little bit until just see the number of participations. Maybe just when they get notified that I'm live, so they start to open the channel. So just wait a little bit. Hey, hello Vish, welcome. Hey, welcome Adrian. Greetings from South Africa. Hey, welcome dear, and greetings from here, Beirut, Lebanon. Okay, so just wait another minute and we will complete what we have left in the previous session. Today we will start implementing the authentication system and creating the repositories for that, dealing with the Microsoft ASP.NET identity with JSON Web Tokens, or known as JWT, to implement the authentication and the authorization flow in the system. So, hey, Maximo. So great. I think we can get started right now. We are good enough. Thank you so much for joining us here today. So in the previous session, we have, as you have seen, we have created the database and we have initialized the models and we have initialized all the project that has required to make our application works. So today we are going to implement that and continue with the first. We will implement the authentication and use the, let's say, ASP.NET identity, as I've said, and JSON Web Tokens to implement that. It's going to contain, as we have mentioned in the description of the project, there's going to be two roles, the user and the admin, the one that's able to manage the content of the platform. So to get started, the first thing I should do is I would go to the server and then I would go to the startup here. Now, here in the configure services, to register all the services I need in the, let's say in the dependency injection, I have to register the authentication using JSON Web Tokens, and I have to register the identity. And to do so, that's simply we can say services dot add an identity, like that. Now, this one is a generic method, and it takes two types. The first type is the type of the user, like, because by default the user, if we go back to the models project here, now, okay, open up this model. As you can see, the default user comes with ASP.NET identity called identity user, but we have extended that, and right now it becomes application user. So we have to say, okay, use application user. Okay, click Control dot to add the models namespace here, and then the second parameter type is going to be the type of the role. And basically, the default type of the role that comes with the ASP.NET Identity called identity role. So just like that. And here you have to add the namespace or reference to Microsoft ASP.NET Core Identity, just like that. So here we have a few comments. Digories, hi Ahmed, congratulations. Thank you so much, man. And we have maximum video quality is low. Could you please confirm that if the video quality is good and you can follow with me all? And another question, like management roles is config in user model or identity user. Basically, the role is separated from the user. So here, when you're adding this identity role, so right now we are using this one, and basically this one is just has, like if you go to that property, it has the ID and the name of the role. This one is the normalized name and concurrency stamp, like comes with the, by default with the. When you create the role, they are being created. So it just what you have to populate is just the name. So we will do this in a bit. So, okay, great. So the quality is fantastic. Thank you so much for confirming that. So right now, we can complete with this services.add identity. Right now, what you can do here, if you want, for example, to manage the strengths of the password, you can add options for the identity here, like in this. So here within those options, you can do whatever you want. Like let's say we want, like the most popular configuration to do is the power of your password. So you can say password like dot required digit. Like if the password must contain at least one digit, you can set this one to true. Basically, by default, this one is true. But if you want to make the password simple or you want to make it more complicated, you can just manipulate those settings a little bit. So let's see. I will just password dot, for example, require lowercase. I'll make it true, and options dot password dot require, for example, uppercase. By default, all of those are true, but I'm just showing you like how you can manage those things from those options here. Right now, after you have added the identity, you have to add, you have to call the extension method called add EntityFramework stores, and basically this one will add the implementation of EntityFramework to ASP.NET Identity, and here we have to pass that our application DB context. It's just like that. So that's it. And another function we have to call is called add default token providers. So you can call this just like that. And right now, basically this function helps to this default token providers add, you know, when you are trying to reset a password or when you are trying to confirm the email, you basically receive on your email or the user email inbox, like he gets a token. So basically those are the providers that provide this token. You can create your own provider, and basically by default, if you use the default one of ASP.NET Identity, and that's basically amazing, and I'm using that. The first course in AK Academy I've started last year called Building Secure APIs. I'm talking about all this stuff and how you can make the reset password, how you can confirm the email. Right now, for this video or for this course, we are just going to scoop it for login, register, and manage the authorization, because other stuff are like very easy to do, and I have already mentioned that in this repository here. So you can have a look at that. Called on my GitHub account, I will mention the link in the description box, called Identity Core course. So you can find here all the stuff regarding reset password and other things. Right now, another thing we have to do is basically we need to add the authentication, define the authentication schema that we are going to use, because the code is just like this one. I can take it. Maybe I can save just sometimes. Okay, and then I will paste it here. So, okay, now let's add that. We need to add the package Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.Authentication.jwt barrier. So find and install. Okay, this is gonna install the latest version. Okay, great. So let's see right now. Let's explain this code and okay. Now just let's focus on this part. So basically, this one register the required steps to make the authentication or the required services and define the schema of the authentication, which is called basically barrier. This one is a constant string that defines by this class JWT barrier defaults. So here you define the authentication schema. You just set it to barrier token, and the code here I have just got called add JWT barrier authentication. This one is basically validating and helps you, the service, generate the token that you or let's say validate the token that we are going to generate in a moment. So you call this function add JWT barrier, and then you pass an options, and those options that are required to validate the token. So here, if you have a look, I'm saying options dot token validation parameters. Those are the configuration we are using to validate the token. What we want to validate, what are the values that are valid basically for the upcoming token. So when the user or the client makes a request to the server, the token are going to be exists in the header and a value called authorization. So in that case, it's going to fetch that token and then try to validate that against those parameters and see if it's a valid token or it's not a valid token. So you just basically define a new object for this token validation parameters, and you just see here you set validate issuer, which is basically you can say that issuer and audience, like you can ignore this, but of course in real scenarios, like if you are using Microsoft Azure Active Directory, for example, like audience and issuer are going to be somehow like your tenant. For our example, I'm going to talk about this like in much more details, but for now, I think if you check the description here, like validation of the issuer migrates forwarding attack that can occur, and here you have okay. So the values I'm going to set basically for the audience and for the issuer for now, you can set whatever you want, but you can set here in the settings. That's before we proceed in explaining that. Let me go to the app settings.json here. And here I'm going to create a new object. I will call it auth settings. And these auth settings here, I'll define for now 3 properties. The first one, I will call it audience. And I will give it a value for now, like just my website. And then I will define the issuer. And also, again, I will just give it a value for my website. Okay. And then at the end, there is a key that's going to use to encrypt and decrypt this token. So basically, this key is going to be it's a binary array. So you define it as a string, then we convert the string as a byte array. So I will call it here key, and then you can set it to the value you want. So for example, I will call it this key that I will use to encrypt and decrypt the token. Decrypt the token, just like that. So this is great. Now we will use those values to basically set the audience issuer of our token. So let's get back to this one. Now, here for the validate issuer, I'm saying that, okay, we need to validate the issuer and we need to validate the audience. Now, the valid audience, basically, when you are giving the token to someone, you can say those are the audience, like the type of the client. For now, I've set it to my website. It's just at the end, it's a value. And the issuer is like, let's say, the organization or the party that issued that token. So again, I've just set those right now to my website, but you can set them to whatever value you want. And then here there is another property called required expiration time. I've set it to true. This means that this token has an expiration time, so we have to set it. At the end, we have another property called issuer signing key. So basically, this is the key that will be used to encrypt and decrypt the token. So now this is a new object of type symmetric security key. So basically, just add reference or the namespace Microsoft.identity model.tokens, add it here. And as a parameter, it takes a byte array. And what the byte array is going to be the representation for the key that we have added here as bytes. So to convert the string to byte array, we will use encoding. Let's add reference to system.txt here. So encoding.utf8.get bytes, and then we pass the value from the configuration, auth settings, and key. So this format here allows you to access a property within a specific object existing in the app settings.json. And this is, if you're just not familiar with this. And yeah, for the valid audience, I'm passing the same thing, like auth settings audience. So I'm taking this value, and valid issuer, I'm taking this value as well. So in this way, this is all you need to add the authentication for using JWT barrier tokens for that system, and to add ASP.NET identity using just those 2 lines of code. So those basically, all of those are just options. There is a default values you can set, and for this code, you can find it as well as I've said in this repository over here, and you can copy it if you want, because like just to save some time. Okay, so let's see before we proceed. Okay. Ayub, share the live video. I think, yeah, the video is available. You can find it on if you check the YouTube channel. You can go to the video section, and then you can find it there. You can find the latest videos. And for expiration token, the validate lifetime, yeah, this one just checks if when the authentication middleware will receive the token. This one just checks, okay, should I validate the expiration or no? But the expiration value, we are going to set it while we are generating that token. This is what we are going to do right now. But before I start generate tokens and this stuff, I need to do something which is basically seed the database with one user and 2 roles. So basically, when you launch the system for the first time, you just have those values like existing out there. And in this case, we can just directly add the user, because by default, the rows are predefined, so you don't have the system empty and then you start to add these users. No, we will manage this by doing seeding for 2 roles and 1 user by default, and that user is going to be for which is an admin. Then we can implement the register and complete the process. So right now, I will go to models here to implement the data seeding I'm talking about. I will create a new folder. I would call it seeding or data seeding. Basically, you can do some, like you can adding some values like on model creating, you can add this, but adding users and roles, you cannot do that directly with the database. Like you cannot say, bring the roles tables from the DB context. And in this case, you can add the role. Microsoft or ASP.NET Core Identity provides you with 2 interfaces or 2 repositories called User Manager and Role Manager, and you can manage your stuff like the users and roles from those. And when you add this middleware, when you register the service here, those 2 repositories become available for you, and you can inject them whenever you want. So what I'm gonna do here, I've created a new folder, and I will create a new class. Okay, just like that, and I will say users seeding, like that. call it whatever you want. So I'll make it public here. So great. Now I will add or inject two services. The first one called iUser Manager, or it's User Manager. Okay, we should add reference to Microsoft ASP.NET Core identity. Now, here you should define the type of the user. As I've said, whether you are using the default identity user, or if you extended it, like what we have done, and it's right now became application user, add reference to models, and I will call it user manager, just like that. And now we have read-only role manager for the type of identity role, which is counts by default with identity. And here we'll say role manager, just like that. Create the constructor, and let me do this. Okay, great. So now I can say user manager equals user manager, role manager. Okay, like that. Now I will create a function here. I'll make it async. Task seed users, or let's call it seed data in general, because it will seed the users and roles. Okay, great. So nice. Now, before we seed or we add any data, first we will check like if there is any user or if there is any role. So just ignore this function. But if there is not and it's empty, so in this case, add two roles and then add user for that roles. So what I'm gonna do, I'll type like var, or I can say if role manager dot get find. Here in the role manager, you can find all the functions that allows you to create, edit, and get the roles you have within your database. And all the entity framework stuff is wrapped behind those two repositories. Like this one, just like the repository pattern we are going to implement. So they are just providing you with the functions you want, and they handle all the logic behind that communicates with the database. So I would say find by name async. The name is going to be admin. Let's await. Okay, not equals to null. So if it's not null, then just basically return. This means, okay, the roles are there, so don't do anything. But if not, right now we are going to create the roles. So I'll type var role or admin role, like that, equals new identity role. And here you have set of properties. You have to fill only the name, and identity is responsible for the rest of the stuff. And right now we can type await role manager dot create async, and here you just add the role, admin role, just like that. So this is how you can create a role. As you have seen, like this is pretty simple. Now let's copy that and do this for the user role, like this, and then do that. Okay, this is great. Now let's create a user, and after we create the user, we will assign it to the admin role, because by default we will have admin. Then after that, when the users of the system are going to register in the normal flow, so in this case, they can create their own user by themselves. So we are just caring about an admin, because at least our system should have an admin at the beginning. So again, I can say admin equals new application user, like that. And there is a set of properties you have to fill, and rest of properties are going to be set by identity. So the most important one is email. So I'm going to set it for test@dotnetlabs.com. Now the username the username is going to be used for the login. So I'm going to set the username and the email for the same property. See, some websites are using the username, like same for the email, but other websites prefer to have like an email and the username, like separated values. But you have the total freedom to do what you see suitable for your solution. Now we have the first name, those are the properties that we have created, and we'll call it on here last name Smith, just like that. So this is the admin. Now it's just basically that's it. Now another step that you should do is just call await user manager dot create async, and here you should pass the user you want to create, which is the admin in this case, and there is an overload for this function that takes the password. So here you pass the password as a plain string, and identity behind the scenes are going to do the magic by managing, let's say, encrypting the password and creating the hash, add some salting, and do the stuff. So here, the password should be strong, require 1 digit, uppercase and lowercase, and by default you should have some special character. So I'm going to make it test.123. Oh, great. This is everything you need to do to create a user. Now the last step, which is assign this user for a role, and that's pretty simple. What we can do is just again call user manager dot add to role async. Look at that. That's pretty simple. And you pass application user object, and then you pass just the name of the role, and that's it. This is the process that you can assign user to a role. So the user is the admin, and the role called admin, just like that. So that's pretty simple. Now what we have to do is just to call this function on running the application for the first time, and in this case, we will have all the data seeded and existing in the database. So let's save this, and okay. Basically, what I do to store this data, usually I put it here. You can make it in a specific controller and make a call for that. Like, for example, you can make it in the home or in the weather forecast. So whenever you call the weather forecast, all the data gets seeded. But you can also, and I usually do that basically, you can put it here. It's not going to be called asynchronously, but yeah, it's still working. So you can do the approach that you find it suitable for you. But for now, we can put it here or we can put it here. So I think let's leave this one and do it my approach. So here in the mail words, if you want to bring a registered services, basically in our case, the user manager and the role manager, you can inject them here because the dependency injection is working also for a specific methods. So you can add user manager for application user here like that, manager, and we have role manager identity, role manager, just like that. Okay, so those are getting injected by the dependency injection container. So right now we have those values, and what we can do here, let's say var data seeding equals new data seeding. Okay, now we can pass the 2 properties we want. Okay. What do we have over here? Okay, it's called user seeding, sorry. So let's go back to this one. Now, for the constructor, we can pass the user manager and the role manager, just like this, and we can call data seeding dot seed data, just like that. So as you can see, this one will show a warning because this one is awaitable, and in this case, it's going to be run synchronously You can add here like .wait. Yeah. Or as I've said, you can add it in one of any of the controllers, like the home controller, and whenever you run the application for the first time, you redirect to that one, and the data will get seeded. So let's run the app for now, and meanwhile, I'm gonna open SQL Server to see what's gonna happen within our database. So you can just please confirm if everything is going okay and you are able to get all the ideas I've mentioned until now. Okay, great. Now the application runs successfully. So if we go to the database, now let me go, get inside this one, open databases, and then we have .NET Labs here, and I'll click New Query. So that's great. Let's now run this query, select from ASP.NET users, and let's see. Okay, here we go. Look at that. Here we have the user, and as you can see, we have just populated first name, last name, username, and email, but we got all the values populated. And if you look at the password here, it's hashed and strongly hashed, basically. Even you, as the owner, you don't have a way to detect this password or to know it. So, and those are another features enabled by default for you by ASP.NET Identity. You can just leverage them very easily, like phone number confirmation, email confirmation, two-factor enable, lookout if the user tries to enter the password multiple times. But okay, as I've said, let's just concentrate on authentication and authorization for now. And if I make another call for ASP.NET roles and call this, and as you can see, we have those two roles has been created for us. And another table we can have a look, which is ASP.NET user roles. And basically, this table shows the relationship between those two tables. Each user has multiple roles, and each role could be assigned for multiple users. And basically, they are many-to-many, the relationship here. So this is the table that maps this relationship. And as you can see, this is the ID of our user, and this is the ID of the admin role. So this user is successfully an admin right now. So that's great. Now we can move to another part, which is create that token. And okay, so I'll close this and complete with the other stuff. So now I will follow the hierarchy I've talked about. Like I will make repositories. So in this case, the services will talk to the repositories, and they don't know like what they are doing basically behind the scenes. They will just call. They will just be based on abstractions. And this is why I will create here like a new repository. There is also another question. I have mentioned this already in text basket. Like people loves to create multiple tokens for multiple repositories. And there is people that prefers to create one generic repository. Basically, my approach is to create your own repository for each, let's say, for each entity, because sometimes, like in our case right now, I'll create a repository for users. And in this case, what I'm going to do is basically just get the user and create user. I don't need update and delete for now. So this means there is no need to have a generic repository that has get all, get one, add, update, delete. So this is why I prefer to have one repository for each entity. So I will create the first repository for users, and I will call it users repository like that. Click enter. So it's going to be an interface, public interface, like this. Okay, great. So now one of the functions that's going to be called is called application user. So let's add reference to this one, to the models for the repository project. Okay. I'll click on add dependencies and I will just add reference to the models manually. Okay, I think this is better, and now we can use reference. Okay, great. So a function would be called get user by ID async. Then here we can add the ID. And another function will be available as get user by email. And task create user async string, or sorry, application user, and we can pass the role name just like that. So yeah, that's the function we are going to do right now. You'll see that right now in the implementation of this repository, I'm going to do the same thing. Like basically, Microsoft already done that using user manager and role manager. Why I'm doing this? I'm doing this because, as I've said, I want to make the services to rely on this interface and not on user manager and role manager, which are basically in this case tied for EntityFramework. I need things to be in like an abstraction manner. So in this case, every layer is isolated from another one. So here I will call the implementation identity users repository like that. And this one implements users repository. Okay. Now we can click here and click on implement interface. So we have those three functions. Now, what we should do is to inject the services I have used in the data seeding. So I'm going to copy this, go back, paste that here. Let's add. Okay, great. Now let's change the name of the constructor. Okay, nice. So now all the services required for this has been added successfully. Now what I'm going to do is just call the functions that those services provides, and I can call create async, pass the user, and pass the name. Pass the password. Okay, we have forget the password here. Let's pass it in another parameter. Like that. Okay, so this create now takes a password, pass a password, make it async, and now let's make the call for wait user manager dot assign, or sorry, add to role async like that. And what I'm gonna do right now is add the user and the name of the role. So look at that. I'm just doing the same, but as I've said, the services will call those abstraction. So for this one, it's pretty easy. It to be like that. Return await user manager dot find by email, and we can pass the email here. So let me change this one to email. Okay. And the last one, just like this one. So let's take it from here, paste it here. Find by ID, and by the ID, and make it async. So in this case, right now, we have this repository just works fine. We have it abstracted using this interface, so we can call this interface. So now I can close this, and let me go to the repositories project. And what I'm gonna do is now I have the repositories just like the DB sets available in dependency in DB context. Now what I want to do is to create something called unit of work, and in this pattern, like unit of work is just like dependency DB context, sorry, but this one is just based on abstractions and interfaces. So the services will not talk directly to the DB context of EntityFramework. They will talk to that unit of work that contains those repositories as interfaces. And in this case, this one will help you so much in create unit testing. And this is what we are going to do after we finish this course, creating the server and the client. I will make one video of how to create unit tests and take advantage of the abstraction that we are doing. So I will create that unit of work. And again, I will create a unit of work. OK, let's call it public. And here, it's an interface, sorry. So that's great. Now let's add users repository. I'll call it users. Like that, and it's going to be get only. And there's going to be a function which is async commit changes async. Some people some developers like open the database, open a connection to the database, and call context.save in each operation in the repository, like get or save or update or delete. But I don't prefer to do this because sometimes you need to make a bulk of operations and just call the save at the end. So in this case, you can have, like later on, you will have iPlaylist, iVideos, all the repositories will be here. And then this one will call the save changes async. So let's see the implementation of that. It's going to be pretty simple. I will call it EF unit of work. So this is the implementation for EntityFramework. Maybe you will use something else like MongoDB or pure Ado.NET. So in this case, you don't need to be tied specifically on EntityFramework. So right now, we need to inject those as well. Let me copy that again. But we need here something else, which is also the private read-only application DB context. We need it to be injected. DB. OK. Now I can say DB equals DB. That. ODB. OK, great. So if you look at this, this one will be injected in each service, and it's just like the DB context. Those are, let's say, the tables of the DB set, but they are interfaces, repositories. So your services talks directly with this one, and in this case, they don't know anything about the implementation. So when you are going to create unit tests, you can simply mock this one by creating a fake implementation, like repository that talks to a data in the database or in memory. We can do a lot of things using this approach. Maybe are we repeating some code, writing some like additional thing that we can avoid if we talk directly with DB context. But this, when you are going to scale and make a robust application with efficient unit testing, this is the best approach. You write few lines of code, but keep things like steady and small and abstracted, the most important thing. So right now, let's initialize these users, and I will create a private user repository just like that, and I will call it users, but like this. And this property is read-only, so it's going to be only get. And I would say if users is null, then users is equals the implementation of that one, which is called identity users repository, just like that. And it takes user manager and role manager as parameters. So right now, this user initialized, and we can return it back to this property. So whenever we call this one, we check. If this one is null, then initialize it. And after that, we can call it once. Whenever we retrieve it, it checks, OK, it's not null, and it returns it directly. So in this case, we will follow the same steps for other tables. But for now, we just have users. So let's complete with that. And for this one, this is a very simple function. It's going to be just like that, await db.save changes async. Okay. Maybe we'll focus on this part later, but for now, all my concentration is just this one. So what I have to do right now is to go to the server and startup. And within this startup, I'm going to register.add scoped unit of work. Okay, we need to add reference. Let's add it manually because there is a little bug in Visual Studio that shows you loading forever. I'll add repositories here. And basically, I need all the projects to be called from the API. So I'll add reference to the repositories. And now this is the implementation called EF unit of work. So that's pretty simple. We need only to register this one because the repositories, the implementation is going created by us manually. So this is great. Now we can move to another layer, which is the services. And basically it's after the controller. So it's before the top. So I will add a new class and I will call it user service. And again, I will create interface, then implementation. So in this case, the controllers will also be will rely on those interfaces and not directly the implementation. So interface, just like that. And this one will be task. And here I will call it register user async. There is going to be another one, task. I will define the return value, but for now, let's leave it as object. I'll call it login or generate, let's say, token async. That, and it will take. And here we should create a register request object and generate or login request. Those objects or those data transfer objects should be created in the shared project because they are going to be referenced by the client and the server. So I will create here a new class and I will call it login request in the shared project. Okay, public, and it will take two properties. Take like email and password. Like that. So let's add required here. So we need to install the package system.component model.annotations. And it is an email address. It should be an email address, and the password is required. Okay, just like that. So this one is the login request. I will go back to this one. So let's suspend this just for the time being. And this one will take login request reference. Okay. Let's add reference to the repositories, and we need models, infrastructure, and shared. Okay, let's click. Okay, this one has been added. Yeah, I think this one should be .NET Standard 2.1. So it can reference all those objects or references. Great. Now we can say model here. Okay. I'll talk about the response later. Let's now create the implementation and implement the generate token function, which is the core of this lesson. So I'll say users service. I'm going to implement our users service like that. And let's get the implementation. That's nice. And now here we can add or inject the unit of work. Unit of work like this. Unit of work. And then unit of work. Okay, that's great. So now we have this ready. So basically for generate the token, now let's start with the implementation of this function. To generate the token, what this one is going to do is to check if this user exists, then it will check if the password is valid. Then after that, it will, let's say, generate the token if there is a user and the password is correct. So first we need to get the user by email to make sure that the user exists. So I'll type user equal the weight, and look at that, unit of work dot users dot get by email async model dot email. So look at that, that's pretty easy. So unit of work here is just exactly like DB context. We can access the stuff this way. And then I would say if user equals null, then OK. There is some stuff to do. We will initialize a library called auto wrapper to help us like return those objects or something like that. But for now, what I'm going to do, I will just add through new, or we can just return null. This means there is something wrong. I will add to do beside that. So return response with message user not found. Okay. Now, another step, which is to check if the password is valid. And this one, we need to go back to the user's repository. So I'm going to go to this one, right-click, go to definition. And here, I should add another function. And this function will be pool check password, async. So it's going to be task. Take a user. And then it will take password, enter it for that user. And here we can add implementation for that. So add async. And it's going to be just that simple, await user manager. I'm a big fan, basically, for those two services like user manager and role manager, because you can see how simple they are. So check password async. This function takes user, the user that we just wrote by email, and then the password entered by that user, and it returns true or false. So that's great and pretty simple. Now we can go back to the services here, and we can say if await unit of work dot users dot check password async the user and model dot password. And in this case, if it's not valid, what I do is put all of this within parentheses, and if not, okay, again, I should return like invalid username or password, but for now, just return null. So now the user is valid, and also the password is right. So what we have to do is to generate a token for that user. To do so, we need to create first a group of claims. So basically, the claims are like a set of key values that is going to define the user, like first name, like that, ID, email, and the roles are going to be a collection. So to do this, I'll create a new variable called claims. It's going to be an array of type claim, like that. Let's add reference to system.security.claims. And it's an array. So here you can define all the claims you want to retrieve back in the token, because basically the token is three parts: part for the signature, and part for the algorithms, and there is something called payload, which is basically the claims that represent the user that logged in or owned this token. So one of the claims we want to retrieve, so I will add a claim. So here we'll use the claim types. Basically, the claim is a string type and string value, but there is a predefined claim type that specify specific schema, or they are well known, let's say. And you can find them here in the claim types static class, and one of them called name identifier. This one is the ID, so you can set the user ID here. Let's add names just like that. You can press Ctrl D to duplicate the roles. This is just a set of Visual Studio nice shortcuts. So given name, which is the first name, and there is surname for the last name. Nice. And we have email, the email, and we need at the end say, okay, those are the properties. What we can, we need to set the role at the end. So basically, each user in ASP.NET Identity can own multiple roles, but in our case, there is only one role. So we need to use a function called to retrieve our roles. So let's go back to IUnity-fork, press F12 to go to this function here, and I'm going to retrieve string. I'll call it get user roles async. So this one will take the user, just like that. Let's create implementation. Okay, so this one, let's make it async. Now return or var roles equals await user manager dot get roles async. So as you can see, get roles async, this function takes user and returns to you a list, or you can say enumerable of type string, which are basically the roles that are this user related to. So the user that passed here. Okay, now this one will returns a list of roles, but what I need is just one role because our application supports only one role for each user. So it's going to be roles.first or default from link. Okay, just like that. So that was also pretty simple. And in this case, I'm able to retrieve all the roles. Let me rename this. By clicking Ctrl-R, Ctrl-R, you can rename all the stuff at once or all the references for the member that you are trying to rename. So get user roles async, like this. Okay, great. So now we have get user role async, this function, and let's go back to iUser service. Okay, and by default ASP.NET Identity and the JWT authentication schema uses the claim role to identify the role of this user. So we will add a role. It's already predefined. This is its value. 2. Let's bring the role here. Var user role equals await Unity-fork dot users dot get role async user, like that, and we can pass a user role here. So this is it. That's pretty simple, basically, to add to define the claims. Right now, what you have to do is we can start creating the token. So I will create var JWT token equals new JWT security token, and here install package system.identitymodel.tokens.jwt. Let's click find and install the latest one. Okay, great. So now here in the constructor, we can pass all the values we want to pass. Oh, I'm just checking the time that it passed very quickly. So what we have to do is let's complete this function and then move on. Okay, so JWT security token. Nice. Now, those are all the optional parameters that you can see and you can pass to generate the token. So one of the values are the issuer. So we can say issuer. I'm using this because all of those are optional parameters. And here, I should bring the issuer from this one. So I need to push those values from this one to the services here. So what can I do? Maybe I can inject the I configuration, which is, I am not a big fan of doing this approach. Another thing is to add options. So to do that, what I'm going to do is going to the infrastructure project, the one that we have created for this approach, and I will click on class, and I will call it auth options. Here, you can say public string, issuer, string audience. We have public string, the key that are going to be used to encrypt that. So we just create this simple class here. Now let's save that. And I will go to the server here in the startup. So we can initialize that object. There is multiple ways to do that. You can use the configure option like this. But in this one, you have to inject I options. But another approach, which is pretty simple to do, is just to call add scoop. And here, you can just do like this, SP, which is the service provider, and return a new auth options. Let's add using .infrastructure. In this case, you just send the value that the authentication service wants, and you don't send all the I configuration with the connection string and all the stuff that's basically available. So like that. So now here, I would say audience equals to this one. This is the manual way to do that. And another way is to use the configure options. I'm going to use this in another place, like for example, when you configure emails or something like this. So in that case, you have access to all the methods to do your things. Okay, let's add that here. Fantastic. So right now we have this object available, and we can inject it very simply in the iUser service. And this is the magic of dependency injection. You just put that here, and it's just available. Auth options, auth options. Okay. Auth options equals. Okay. Great. For the issuer right now, we can just say auth options dot issuer, and all the time is pretty limited with me here. We can use the function that's already defined. I can go to services, iUser service, and here there is the login function. Okay, this one. Okay, we can take this. And I'll paste that here. And let me explain what is this. So here we should create the key, the security key that we are going to use to encrypt the token. Now there is no need to do the configuration. We have the magic option here, and we can say .key. So we have that key. And for the issuer, this is new security token, and you just pass the issuer, audience, the claims, the expiry date. Here you pass the expire, like when this token will be expired, and you pass the key that's going to be used to encrypt the token. So for the issuer, I'll say auth options dot issuer. For the audience, just you can say auth option dot audience. So in that case, okay, great, cool. We still have. Now, this object has the token for you. As you can see, it's pretty clear. Just pass the name of things. Those are the claims or the payload of the token that are going to be pushed back to the client. And at the end, to get that string representation of that token, what you can do is just create a new JWT security token handler, and you call the function write token, and basically it returns to you token as a string. And this one is the token that we are going to use. So that was pretty simple. Like if you look, maybe there are about 50 lines of code, but the process is pretty simple. We still have to do some cosmetic to this function to make it beautiful. But for now, I would like just to focus on the main concept. Now, because I have defined the response type to object in general, so I'm going to return an anonymous object, which is just a new. And I will define my own properties. I'll call access token equal the token as a string. And let's remove this one and return the expiry date. So this service going to do this one. So whenever we make a login request, we can retrieve access token and expiry date. So now I'm done from this service. Just as I've said, the core concept, let's go back to the server project and controller, add controller, and I will create add. And then what we are going to do, I will create authentication controller, and then here click add. So great. We have this controller. Sorry, I think I have created the wrong type of controller. Maybe I should create API controller, which is okay. Choose that one, and yeah, choose API controller. And then I'll call it authentication controller. So now we have this empty controller. What we have to do, maybe that take sometimes, but right now you can just inject and make one call. Then you have the magic of the authentication available. So let's see private user service. Let's add reference for this one. And let's say users service that. Okay. That's great. So let's create the function. HTTP post. I would call it login, like that. Sorry. Okay, and we can access task result login, and this one will take login request dot shared. Okay, model. Now, here all we have to do is just to make a call for this function, and we have the result ready. So login response equals await user service dot generate token async, add the model, and that's it. That's like somehow magical, just one call, but as you can see, controller talks with the services, and then the services talks to the repositories, and the repositories like talk to the DB context and EntityFramework and do that magic. So we will check this, and as I said, those are just for now. We are going to use a library called AutoWrapper to handle how the response will look like for the user. But if it's null, then return bad request. Set the error response code 400, and we'll say user invalid username or password. else we will return OK and return the object we got from that service. Just like this. Now we forgot to do one thing, which is register this one in the dependency injection container. So let's do that by connect services.add scope my user service. OK, and add the implementation here. And it is just like that. So before we make a quick recap for what I have done, let's try to test this by using Postman. Okay, so let's see. We have Amr al-Madani. Hey, hi, bro. How are you, man? And Aftab Ahmad. Hi, Ahmad. Hi. Okay, great. Now we have it running in this tab. So the URL of the API is the same for the application because we are on an ASP.NET Core hosted app. So I can copy this. And let's create a new post request. It is /API/authentication, the name of the controller, /login. And what we can do is in the body, let's choose row and choose JSON. And here, let's pass the email. It's going to be test@dotnetlabs.com. And the password to test.123. And then I will just add a breakpoint here. Okay, just this, and let me click login or send. Okay, the endpoint, right now we have hit the endpoint and we check the model. There is a test and those are the values. Now, let's go step by step and we can understand the logic behind this. So we go to generate token, then we go to get user by email async from the repository. And this one, okay, it returns the user successfully. It's not null. Now it tries to check the password. So the identity core does its magic to do that by, as I've said, hashing the password. So the result is going to be true. And now it's trying to bring the roles. So let's go. And here we have the role called admin. And we have claims. Okay, the claims has been created. Now the symmetric key. Create the token. Convert it to string. And return the object. That was pretty smooth, and it worked from the first time. That's nice. Let's continue. And here we go. Have a look here. We have an object, and it has the access token. This is the token. So let's try to make sure that this one will work, and I will create a new request. It's going to be get and authorization. I will set it to barrier token. Let's set that token in the header here. And then I will set the URL to this one, /weather forecast. But what I will do is I will go to that one and I will make it authorized. So in this case, you cannot make call to this one if you are not logged in. So let's run the app again and test that. So okay, cool. So let's make call for this one. And here we get an error, contains authorization metadata, but middleware was not found that support authorization. Okay. Something very important we forgot to do in the startup. If we scroll down, as you can see, we are not using the authentication and authorization middleware. So we have to do that here. App.use authentication and app.use authorization. Okay. So, okay, app routing should be before that one. The ordering here of the code is important because this is how the HTTP context passes from one middleware to another. Okay. Okay, let's give it another try. I'll click send again. And great, now here we get the data while that controller is protected. This to try to change and remove just this E from the token and send it back again. Let's see what we were. And here we go. Like we got you are unauthorized 401. This is exactly what we want. So try to make it again. Okay, that's great. That's great. So basically, I thought we are going to achieve more in this 1 hour and a half, but basically the time passed very quickly. So just please, if you have any question, you can just post them in the comments so to have a look at them before we end that. And I hope you enjoyed it, just like me while writing this sort of code and dealing with those awesome technologies. So let's see. Hello, any question? Was I that clear? Okay, then it seems like everything's just going perfect. I hope so. And as you know, I'm always available on Twitter and YouTube. Okay, here we get a question. Okay, thank you so much, dear. And yeah, as I was saying, I'm always available on Twitter at Ahmed99, and all the resources and stuff I have, the libraries we have used, I will mention those in the comments after we finish this video. And it's going to be available on YouTube like within 1 or 2 hours, just the processing time. So thank you again, and we will complete what we have done to the moment. The code is also available in GitHub. We will meet you again on Saturday at the same time, probably, and you will. I will, as always, share the date before 24 hours on Twitter. So Thank you guys so much for watching, and see you on Saturday.